lengthy the stories are about our lives, the less we'll get to everybody's voice. So, sir, please go ahead. Identify yourself.
My name is Josh Rubin. I am a special educator from Montgomery County. First of all, I just want to say for your listeners, the roads in Montgomery County are not paved with gold, as is the common misconception. We have somewhere in the vicinity of I think the number I heard was 40% of students who receive at least some subsidy for free and reduced meals. We have more ESOL students than we ever have before. We have people who move from other countries to Montgomery County and to the state of Maryland specifically because of our school system. As a special educator, I work with the severely and the profoundly disabled, and I happen to know for a fact certain families who send their children to my school have moved to Montgomery County specifically because the special education in Montgomery County is among the best in the country. The state of Maryland likes to talk about its #1 public school status. I got an email from the governor a couple of months, probably about a month ago, saying how great it was that the state of Maryland is, again, the #1 school system in the country. And that's fantastic, and I think that it's great. But that was last year. We were #1 last year. We weren't #1 in 2012. We were #1 in 2011, 10, 9. Are we going to stay #1? And I think a lot of that rests on what the people in the State House decide to do. All of them like to puff up their chests, and say we're the #1 school system, we have the #1 school system in the country. All I have to say to that, please, is put your money where your mouth is. If we're going to assume that we're going to keep this #1 status for the rest of eternity, anybody who believes that is about as misguided as believing that the real estate market is going to continue to increase until 2008. My question, and I know I'm speaking to 3 delegates from my county, all of whom are very good supporters of public education, but what is it that you can do that will actually be helpful, especially since now that we have no more senators, because I was kind of hoping to be able to speak to one of the senators from the last hour, but what is it that you guys can do in the House that's going to talk Mike Miller down off the ledge that he has put education funding in?
Who wants to grab that first?
Sure.
Ann Kaiser, go ahead.
Right, first thing, in regards to our #1 status, I know you're talking about some people's chests all puffed out, but the thing I always say at community meetings is we may be #1, but we're not #1 for all kids, and certainly we shouldn't rest until we are. So I do think that the state investments over the years has shown the state's commitment and support for education and wanting to keep it in that place. To answer your question, if you're talking about what will back Mike Miller down, in regards to the pension shift, I think it's very clear that how all of these issues play together this session remain to be seen. I know from everyone who's watching the legislative session, you see us past the halfway point and wonder why more things aren't done. And I think for people who've spent a lot of time down here, like my friend Jane Stern in the front row, is you know that the first month and a half we're doing all the hearings and doing all the proposals. And then it becomes more the time where the proposals are being looked at and the compromises and the negotiations. I think what's out there right now on the different tax proposals, what's out there right now on the pension shift, what will be public in the next 12 to 18 hours on the maintenance of effort bill, how they all play together, I think it remains to be seen. So to say how we'll back the Senate president down, who's been Senate president since we were all in, I don't know, elementary school.
Since before I was born.
Before you were born.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of moving parts out there. I think it's also true that people in the room may also know that if something becomes inevitable here in the State House, to say that we're entirely against it and only against it doesn't allow us to be part of the negotiation to make it less bad or to make it better. So I think we all have to be cognizant of that as we move forward with the pension shift conversation. We might think it's a bad idea, but if it's happening anyway, what can we do to make it not as bad?
Heather?
I think Delegate Kaiser.
Well, I'm curious, as you walk the halls, what are you going to be pushing them for? Have you heard this?
Well, we're trying to hold firm and get as many other jurisdictions to hold firm as possible. You have a united front. I could speak for Montgomery County. You have a united front in the House of a delegation that is saying no, no, no in every meeting, every possible opportunity, no, no, no to the shift. We're encouraging our colleagues in Prince George's and Baltimore City, at least, to hold firm as well. You can't do anything in this state if you don't have those votes, for the majority of the votes from those three jurisdictions. But we've learned in the past, in the 2007 special session, there were things that were being put on the table that Montgomery County was very opposed to, and we hung firm and we kept saying no, and then all of a sudden, talk about the doomsday proposals from the earlier hour, we got a Montgomery County doomsday proposal that basically was like, okay, you don't vote with us, here's the proposal we're going to go with, and here's all the things we're stripping out from Montgomery County that was going to hurt us even worse than for the underlying proposal. And so there are those kind of games that can happen up here that makes this whole negotiation more complicated than what you're going to read about in the newspapers. I think another piece that could be helpful is on the political side of this. The three jurisdictions I discussed are fairly united in opposing the shift. One on the merits of bad policy for education, bad for teachers, bad for students. But it's also bad for us politically. We're not looking to shift the problem to our friends at the county level. Where there are political differences in some of the rural areas, you have some, I'm going to just put it in basic political discussions. You've got some people who are Democrats here who have Republicans in their counties who they don't mind putting the burden on the Republicans to say, you always say you don't want to increase taxes. You run against us for raising taxes here at the state level. Let's put the burden on you to have to raise the taxes at the local level to fix this. And so there are a lot of complicated political discussions and scenarios that interplay with the politics of where votes line up for this. And so don't hesitate to work every angle to try to get your colleagues in every portion of this state to make their voices be heard, and don't just expect the big three jurisdictions to pull this one out. We need support across the board on this.
Absolutely.
Let's go back here.
Okay, hi, I'm Jennifer Martin, and I'm also from Montgomery County. I'm a high school teacher at Wooten. I teach English, and I've been a teacher for about 10 years. So I was one of the lucky ones who was hired in by and educated by the state at Johns Hopkins to become a teacher in my 40s. Before that, I'd been in business for a Fortune 500 company. I'd worked for the federal government. And so I think I'm the kind of person you want to keep. And I moved to the county because I wanted to educate my children in the public schools. I liked the school so much that I decided to change my profession. So I think that what I'm concerned about is this idea about pushing the revenue raising to the counties and wondering about the courage of my state legislators to ask for what is needed to support public education, which I believe really does support democracy. The other thing that I'm concerned about is I'm a homeowner. My property values are what they are because of our fine schools. And guess what? If you're going to attack my pension, then my house value is even more important to me than it was before. I need to make sure that both things are not going to be negatively impacted by the state's decisions. I'm very concerned, and I'm very disappointed in what I see as a pushing of the courageous decision down to the local level. I feel as if the state should be stepping up to the challenge here. I wanted to remind you about the kinds of things that I'm seeing in my classroom. I've been a teacher for 10 years now. When I started, I had an average of about 22 kids a class. I'm a regular educator, but I teach inclusion with special ed students, and usually in the beginning I would have an aide or even another teacher to be co-teaching with me. Well, those numbers have been diminishing, and so many of us are now in much larger classrooms. I'm teaching more like, I think I have we're capped at 29 supposedly. Well, I'm capped out and above. Last semester I was above my maximum number per class. So I'm teaching close to 30 kids a class now, up from, as I say, about 22. And we have fewer supports in the classroom. Plus there's been a movement toward inclusion so that you're teaching more and more special needs kids, emotionally disturbed kids, kids who need individual attention, which I am less able to provide them before, as much as I would like to give it. So I'm concerned about that. And really, what I want you to understand is that this is something that is affecting our children first, but who else is being affected here more than the general public? It's women's jobs we're talking about here. Something like 84% of teachers are women. And I don't hear anybody bringing this up, that when you stick it to teachers, you're sticking it to women. And that really bothers me, because teachers are not selfish. We are generous people. We are not here to make a profit. The people who profit from our work are the public. We bring jobs to counties because we bring an educated population up who can be hired. We bring businesses in because they want to send their kids to schools too that are good. So we don't have low taxes, we have higher taxes, but we provide the services. I'm sorry to interrupt you and to go on too long.
I just want to give people a chance to respond. And people behind you a chance to say something as well. I think that your point, especially your last point, given everything that's happening in this country around women's rights at this moment, is a critical point to raise about this affecting women. But Ingrid, I'd like to let you respond first, and I'm curious for you to respond as president of MACO about the conversations going on around the counties around this issue, because that's what you're doing in the halls of Annapolis, is lobbying for MACO, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Again, it's exactly what she said. It's a women's issue. It's about protecting the resources that we have in our counties already, but the resources that we need to continue to move forward. I'm from Prince George's County. We're currently facing a $124 million deficit. With a $124 million deficit, you add that onto that the possibility of over $30 million bill that comes for the first year. And that's just the first year, because in the out years it looks to double and increase astronomically again. And with that, I think I want to also point this out, the problem that we have. And we know that the governor has worked with us in the past, and we hope that the governor will continue, because I think Delegate Kaiser said that this is kind of a negotiation. This is a starting point. So we ask you to hold firm, because we can't afford even a piece of this. And the reason why I say that is there are some sweeteners that are mentioned, but I say those sweeteners are not guaranteed. Those sweeteners, a lot of the delegates, as I walk the halls, they're saying, we can't pass this piece, we can't pass this piece, we can't pass that piece. There's 4 pieces that they're talking about that are sweeteners. But in the end, those sweeteners may not pass. And those sweeteners are only for the first year. So as we walk the halls, just as you all are walking the halls, we ask you to join us. As MACO, we ask you to join us to talk to the delegates that are not already confirmed. These delegates here are saying that they're strong and they're steadfast. We need to get to everyone, because as you've seen it before, every vote counts, and it may come down to that one vote.
So let me ask this question before we go back to the audience. And I'll go back to Ray Leone, who's the head of the PTA in Anne Arundel County. And by the way, folks, as I asked this question, we asked a broad scope of people to join us tonight that we're not on the same page as they are in this hour, but that's fine. Just to let you know that. We're trying to do this intentionally. But I'm curious, because you live in Anne Arundel County, and there are a lot of homeowners in Anne Arundel County, and people who vote in Anne Arundel County say, no, we don't want to raise taxes. We don't want this to happen.
The better part of 80%.
So talk a bit about the reception, even in your PTA or the PTAs that you represent to these kinds of issues. What are you hearing?
I'm hearing that the folks that have children care. The folks that don't have children have other priorities.